Okay, it is 2:30 and I call the meeting to order. Welcome those attending both here in our meeting location and those joining over Zoom. Well, glad you are here. Hope you come back again for our October meeting. My name is Jim Amor. I'm the president of the Computer Club. I'd like to introduce some of the other elected officers of the club. Kenneth Tubal is somewhere in the frame right there. He's our vice president, program chair, and secretary is Nancy Brower. She is joining us via Zoom. Our treasurer Sue is out of town on family matters
with the cash.
with our cash. Yes. We have who else? We have board of trustees. We have Jim Holton. He's joining us with a Zoom. And was Dave DeRock here?
He is.
Is he?
He was.
Okay.
He was.
And he's one of our treasurers or our trustees. One announcement that needs to be made ahead of our business meeting, which takes place after the presentation. We are happy to announce that our October general meeting will be held at our new location in the Fellowship Hall of Neal Avenue United Methodist Church. We will send out a map and how to get to that location for members and guests and are not familiar with the area. There will be a lot more information about the move during the business meeting. And at this time, our program chair, Kenneth Tubal, will introduce this month's presenter and topic.
So, John, I'm going to turn it over to you in just a second. We are talking about adding a NAS or network attached storage device to your router through the USB. I guess I should get in the camera view. Through the USB port on your router. So, John, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what we're going to learn today?
Okay. Folks, I live in Arlington, Virginia. You've probably heard of that place. It's across the river from the Potomac. Although the mailing address for the Pentagon is technically inside the District of Columbia, it's actually located here in Arlington County, physical location on landfill on the Potomac. And maybe you've heard of the Marine Corps Memorial, otherwise known as the, well, now it's escaped me, but in any event, that's also in Arlington County. And some of the astronauts have lived in Arlington County for the U.S. space program from time to time because they end up working at NASA headquarters in Washington. So this is a place with a lot of history associated with it. It was originally part of the District of Columbia when that city was created, and it got given back to Virginia along with Alexandria City, I think about 1802. I grew up here. I was born here. I don't intend to die here. I'm now retired, and I think I'm going to move to a place with, frankly, lower taxes. But this is a good place to be in general if you're looking for a job in the technical arena. Some people say that next to Silicon Valley, this place employs the most computer programmers in the United States. And I was one of those for many, many years. Worked for contractors for several federal agencies. I did work for a couple of federal agencies as an employee on summer jobs when I was in college, and that taught me I never wanted to be a federal employee. But federal contractors get paid pretty well. So here I am with a computer and a nice monitor. Actually, I've got two other computers sitting here that aren't hooked up. No, I don't spend all my time in front of a screen. I was out hiking yesterday. And I visited almost all of the states in the United States. And even spent some time in Ohio. In 2018, I was there for a few days and thoroughly enjoyed it around Cincinnati. So I have a master's degree in computer science. I'm not going to talk gobbledygook to you today. No techie phrases unless I define them first. And you're going to see a lot of screenshots today of how to hook up your Windows computer or your iPhone or your Android phone to your NAS through your local area network, meaning your Wi-Fi or Ethernet or both. As long as they're all on one router, you should be able to get them all to access your NAS. So there we go. Do you want me to start the presentation at this time?
Sorry, I was a little distracted with some logistical things here. Yes, but before you do, I have a question for you, John. Would you prefer to have questions held to the end, or would you like to be interrupted?
I'll tell you what, here's what I found. Most of the time when people ask questions, there are things that are answered later in the presentation. So let's see here. Have you, yes, you've got chat going. You can physically write your question in chat if you wish, and I will look at that at the end. It may be that some of the answers that I provide to those questions raise other questions. So at that point, we can just do it on the audio channel here. We can just talk, and I'm happy to do that. But I do suggest for those who have questions, write them in chat, please. Is that a reasonable approach?
We are here for you, sir. So we will do that. Yes.
Okay. Anything else, folks, before I start showing slides?
I think you're good to go.
Okay. I'm going to start the share. Let me mention the first thing you're going to see is a black screen that allows me to remove some of the little things that end up blocking real slides when I get to real slides. So here's the black screen. And what I do is hide the video panel so that doesn't block part of my screen. Occasionally we find also that the floating meeting controls block part of my screen. So now I've taken care of both of those. And now we're going to talk about something I came across recently that I think will make your life a whole lot easier. If you want to make a local file copy of any slide in this presentation, you can save the current slide simply by using this keystroke combination, Windows and print screen. So what that means is you hold down the Windows key, and while it's down, you tap the print screen key. I only found this recently. I've been using print screen for years. What it does is store the current slide or screen image in an image file in your directory under pictures. It's called screenshots. So in that folder, you will find screenshots that are numbered consecutively. They're all PNG files, PNG type. I want to ask you at this point to let me know, do you see any black bands blocking any part of this slide?
Yes, the one at the very top that says, please move this away from the windows that are
Yeah,
sharing.
that's a little bit tricky. I'm creating using another feature of Windows to make a local
That
copy
was good.
of the
It's
recording.
gone.
Yes, that's because I hovered over the window that it's objecting to. So I'm going to stop that recording, and that'll get rid of that little bar. It should be gone now.
Correct.
All right, thank you. Now, this Windows Plus print screen is really ideal for saving any web page URL or QR code that I have put into this presentation, especially if you have not already learned how to scan QR codes with your smartphone. This presentation does include QR codes. I do this as a convenience for you because once you know how to scan a QR code, this will allow you to access a web page, a PDF document, a phone or tablet app that you can install, an email you can send, other valuable information, all without typographic errors on your part. And that's really the advantage of it. It's not only faster than typing, but it also makes sure that the data is conveyed accurately without typos. We've all had the experience of typing in a long URL and getting it wrong. And then, the browser tells us they can't find that page. But with a QR code scanning capability, which is built into recent versions of iOS and recent versions of Android, you can take a picture of a QR code and go immediately to the place recorded inside that QR code, or customize the email that's recorded in it, or read the PDF document. And what versions allow you to do this? Well, it's Android 10 and 11 and 12 and iOS 11 through 15. And now, if this is brand new to you and you've never heard of this capability, there is a place you can go on YouTube to learn about it. And it happens that I provided a presentation for APCUG that they recorded and put up on YouTube. And here's the URL for that. And this might be the first place that you want to do Windows plus print screen in order to record this URL so that you can go visit it later on. And that'll give you a thorough education in how to use your smartphone or your tablet to scan QR codes. And just by the way, a little tip, you don't even have to hit the button to take a picture when you're running those camera apps and they are properly configured. They will recognize your QR code and translate it immediately for you. Okay, having said that, another blank screen, well, that's because of this special effect here that I just love. There we go. Add NAS to your router is our topic, as mentioned. And we're going to do some definitions right up front. What is NAS? That's an abbreviation for network attached storage, meaning that any device on the network can be used to access the storage just as if it were a flash drive or hard drive attached to your computer. And just to make it as global as possible, that also includes a solid state disk or SSD. Those can also work as NAS. If you were in offices in the 1990s, you probably used a Novell server to act as a storage device for anybody who is logged on to the office network. And you can create folders and store files, retrieve files, and so forth, just as if it were a hard drive connected to your own computer. Pre-Novell, most offices shared files by SneakerNet, diskettes, or by email or flash drives, whatever. Now, NAS can be accessed in your home via Wi-Fi on portable devices, as well as on computers, either by Wi-Fi or by Ethernet. So anything connected to your router can access that NAS. And most of what we're going to do today is learn how to use those devices, because actually setting up the NAS is really quite easy. It's a little bit more difficult and more involved to actually connect your phone and your computer to the NAS. There are a lot of advantages of NAS. In particular, you can make fast backups from your computer to NAS far faster than backups made to cloud storage. You can share it with, as I've already described, with all other devices connected to the same router, the same local area network, either by Wi-Fi or by Ethernet. You can share files to other devices on that, on your local area network, on your router, that are too big to send by email, such as videos. I do a lot of that, so I have a lot of videos stored on my NAS. You can share big groups of files, such as photos of a vacation, in a NAS folder. So that's another reason to use it. Also, because it's local, it's easier to be secure compared to cloud storage, because you never know when something's going to break on cloud storage, and all of a sudden things that were invisible to the rest of the world are suddenly visible. It's a good bit more difficult for that to happen when it's a NAS on your router. All right, so here's our agenda. We're going to talk about how to attach NAS to your router, storage devices that can become NAS, but in a nutshell, that means flash drives, hard drives, and solid state drives. We're going to learn how to configure Windows File Explorer to see the NAS as a storage device and use it like a local solid state drive or hard drive. We're going to talk about how to configure iOS, meaning Apple devices, using the Standard Files app that was introduced in 2011, I think, to see the NAS and use it. Also, how to configure Android devices using an app that is available for free on the Play Store called My Files to connect to the NAS and move files around, copy them, paste them, so forth. All of that you'll learn how to do for Android and iOS today. And of course, you're going to learn the jargon. You've already learned a little bit of it and sound like an expert. And here's some more jargon. Samba is a shorthand for server message block, which in technical publications is abbreviated SMB. But in the world of personal computers, we're not all techies. And so generally that term refers to the term Samba refers to server message block, which is a technique for communicating files between devices on a network. That's a widely used standard, actually, and often involving NAS. Most cloud storage systems also use SMB because most computer operating systems have SMB drivers, as does the last few versions of Windows, Android, and iOS. If your computer, smartphone, or tablet asked you for a choice of NAS access methods, they might list FTP, but they almost certainly also list SMB, and that's the one you should choose in order to communicate with your NAS connected to your router. Here's another bit of jargon, and you'll find that I will mention a rather famous retail store that's based in your neck of the woods in this particular slide. RAID is a redundant array of inexpensive disks. The redundancy is a big part of RAID because it allows you to access files under certain circumstances anyway, certain configurations, even when one of the disks fails. And that's one of the reasons that RAID is popular. There is another reason that is especially valuable in data centers where the RAID may include 20 or more inexpensive disks, and that is because the same file is recorded on various disks within the RAID. Fast file and folder retrieval speeds are possible simply because you can get different parts of the files from different disks at the same time, concurrently. And the second reason is because the files are recorded on several disks. You have a very reliable backup method, even if one of those hard drives, one of those disks within the array of inexpensive disks fails. One of the interesting things I found when I was researching this topic is that products sold by Micro Center as NAS are all actually RAID, because the term NAS and the term RAID refers to two different things. NAS is how you can take advantage of the storage system, and RAID is the organization of the storage system and does not refer to server message blocks or any other method of accessing this, the data in the storage system. Many of those RAID devices sold by Micro Center are as expensive as a computer. And in fact, when you get up to the scale of a RAID used in a data center, chances are it's going to cost many thousands of dollars. So as I just said, NAS, that term refers to how the storage system is connected to computers and made accessible, whereas RAID refers to how the storage is organized inside its box, its container. So there's two different things. So As I mentioned previously, any USB storage device can be NAS. None of these are RAID devices, however. A flash drive, solid state drive, a portable hard drive, and even a hard drive dock for that matter. So I'm going to show you an example, which happens to be the router that I use. It's a Linksys model MR8300. I've been using Linksys brand routers at home for about 20 years, and this was long before any service provider dreamed of providing their own routers to their customers. So I learned how to administer the Linksys routers through my experience at home. And I happened to subscribe to FiOS. They tried to sell me routers, and I told them, no, I've got a router. I'll take responsibility for administering it because I know how to do it. And also because I do not want a company to lock me out of router administration. I want to be able to make sure it's precisely tweaked to the way that I think it should be, not them. Now, if you go to a store like Micro Center or Best Buy, you'll find that many router brands and models have a USB port in addition to several Ethernet ports and antennas for Wi-Fi. Here's an example. Again, the router that I use. This is the back of the router, where on the right it has the power socket and the power switch. Next to that, labeled in yellow, is the socket where you plug in what's called the wide area network, the cable coming in from your service provider. But over here on the left, I've circled something that ought to look fairly familiar. It's a USB 3 port. Most these days are colored in blue like you see here. And this one additionally below the port has a label indicating that it's USB 3.0. And that means that it will communicate with the attached NAS very quickly. That USB 3.0. Now, many years ago, when these ports were first introduced, they were intended for a printer and they were USB 2. And that is fast enough so the printer could be used by all devices on the local area network. In other words, all devices connected to your router. But routers now, since most printers are sold for home use, have other ways to connect to the local area network. Routers are often used to connect NAS through that USB port, and some routers even have 2 USB ports, so you can do both. Or, and I haven't tried it because mine only has 1, but it's possible that you could connect to NAS devices for that matter. Now, because it's a USB port, as I said, anything that works as storage when connected by USB can be used. A flash drive, which is what I used first just as a test, then a portable solid state device or a portable hard drive. And right now I've got a 1 terabyte solid state drive plugged into my router to use as NAS. I mentioned the color code. The USB port is blue in this case, and that of course refers to USB 3. And that's much, much faster than USB 2, so it's very valuable for fast NAS. And of course, I pointed out the print below the port that confirms that it's USB 3.0. Now, how do we get started? Well, you have to do a little bit more than just buy a USB storage device. Your router docks will have some information on how your storage device needs to be formatted. But first of all, what if your router has no USB port? Well, you got to spend some money. You can buy a NAS RAID, which is very expensive, or you can buy a new router, which is a lot less expensive. You can check your router docs to see if your router port will support a NAS storage device. Chances are, unless it's 8 to 10 years old, that it will, as long as it has that USB port. And this is very important. It will not allow you to attach a drive that is formatted any old way. You got to make sure the drive is formatted some way that is specified by your router docs. I will tell you that in case of the router I have, although the docs say it can use any NAS storage device that is formatted for NTFS or FAT32, as it turns out, I tried FAT32 and it didn't work. The only one that worked for me was NTFS, which is the one I prefer anyway. But the point is that sometimes the docs don't give you all the straight scoop. And at that point, you try every drive formatting that the docs specify and find one that works. If none of them work, you need to ask Google what to do, because, or for that matter, go to the router manufacturer's site to see if there are updated docs. So bottom line of this slide is you have to make sure your NAS storage is formatted to satisfy the requirement, as long as the requirements are accurate in the doc. If none of those formats work, like I said, you have to go to other sources to find out what's going on. Okay, so once you've got it formatted properly, you attach it to the router as a test. And there is a real nice 256 gigabyte USB flash drive on Amazon that sells for $13. The one I've been using as a test is a 256 gigabyte flash drive for $20 at Micro Center. Either one will do just fine as long as you format it properly for your router. You can save money and buy a smaller one if you prefer, but frankly, the price for a smaller one doesn't decline much from that $20 point. I bought one for $12 that had 128 gigs on it. Or you may have one sitting around for that matter. It'll work as a temporary NAS device as well, as long as you format it appropriately. Attach the USB flash drive to your router USB port. And then you want to check to see if your router recognizes your USB flash drive. We're going to talk about how to do that. Now, I'm going to show you 3 different ways to figure out the IP address of your router. I'm also going to show you the 2 most common IP addresses for routers. But I'm going to start with this router admin app from Linksys, and it is available both for Android and iOS devices, and it is a free app. Now, here's a screen from the Linksys app on my Android phone. When you open the app, its dashboard shows the router external storage if the router has recognized what you attached to the USB port as storage. I circled it here so that you can recognize it, just in case you also have a recent model Linksys router that is compatible with this app. Now, if the USB flash drive is not connected or the router doesn't detect it, and the primary reason for that, if it's connected, is that it's not formatted properly, then the external storage heading will be absent from this dashboard page of your Linksys app. It simply won't appear. If it does appear, it means that your device is recognized as a NAS. Now here's a QR code to allow you to, if you scan this with your phone, it will automatically open the Play Store app on your phone to the page for downloading the Linksys app. And it's also free for Apple on the App Store. Again, you scan this one in the lower left corner. it'll open the App Store on your phone or tablet, and at the page where you can download the app. And in both cases, for Android and for Apple, the app is free. Now, this is another page that you might want to save with, if you don't know how to scan these QR codes, you might want to save it with the Windows Plus print screen key so that you can see the codes when you do learn how to scan codes with your portable device. Okay. Now, the next thing you need to do is find the IP address of your router. And this is important preparation for connecting Windows File Explorer or the iOS Files app or the Android app called My Files to the NAS. You need to know the router IP address. It's normally found in the router dock. For many Linksys routers, the router IP address is this one, 192.168.1.1. And I recently bought a second MR8300 router and found out that it uses this IP address, 10.157.1.1. So they changed it in the year and a half between when I bought the first one and when I bought the second one. I don't know why. But I do know this. The first address, 192.168, that is reserved for local use. And turns out the addresses beginning with 10, like the second one, are reserved for local use, and they give enough distinct addresses in the local address space for data centers. And that's basically why that is used. Not that I expect these little Linksys routers are going to be used in a data center, but that's why these two particular address ranges exist. All right. Now, as it happens, some people who are really into security will reconfigure the router so that to a different default IP address, one that might not be so easy for somebody who's trying to break into your Wi-Fi to guess. But for most of us, these things are adequate. Now, the first way to find, if you happen to be using the Linksys app, the first way to find this on the dashboard screen is to tap the hamburger icon, so-called because it looks like top and bottom of a bun with something in between in the left corner. When you do that, this screen appears with it's actually a menu pane that rolls in from the left. And in that menu pane, tap Network Administration. And you'll find the very top heading in Network Administration shows an icon of your router next to a word. And in this case, it's living room because I told it where I put the router. This is the router screen that appears when you tap that. And you can see it has a serial number, a model number, a firmware version, and below that, an IP address. And this was my first MR8300 router. It had this IP address, as you can see in the lower right corner. Now, that's one method. You can use the command prompt in Windows to ping the IP address. So a simple way here to do this, if the ping succeeds, then you've got the right IP address. So if you want to try the two most common, you can do it very easily through the command prompt using the ping command. And there's a version of the command showing the prompt. And this depicts a successful ping where it shows all 4 attempts worked and none were lost. There's another way in Windows, and that is to open Windows settings. And in this case, I opened settings, and in the left-hand pane, I tapped on network and internet. You get to a page where it has two headings at the top in the right-hand side, one that says Wi-Fi and one that says Ethernet. Since I was running on Ethernet, I tapped Ethernet, and the screen you see here appeared, and I circled a line at the bottom that says IPv4 DNS servers, and that is where your router IP address will appear. So that's three different ways to kind of discover the router IP address. And now we're going to talk about the part that really is probably most interesting to you, and that is how to get your devices connected to that NAS so that they all can use it. We're going to start with Windows File Explorer. Here's Windows File Explorer. Now it has two parts. It has a pane on the left called the navigation pane. It has a pane on the right called the content pane that displays the contents of whatever folder you click on the left. If the navigation pane does not appear, and once in a while I've accidentally made it disappear, this is what you do. First of all, notice I've created 3 red circles and they're numbered 1, 2, and 3. The first thing you do is click on View in the ribbon menu across the top, and a menu appears. In that menu, tap Navigation Pane, which is circled here and numbered 2. And when you do that, you're going to see a drop-down menu appear. And then in that drop-down menu, you tap number 3, which is, again, labeled Navigation Pane. And that will make the nav pane appear, just in case you're set up without it. Now, there's something else that I want to teach you here, and that's a way to make your NAS permanently visible in what's called the quick access portion of the navigation pane. For starters, to find your NAS, you have to use the scroll bar for the left-hand navigation pane and scroll it all the way to the bottom. And down there, you're going to find a heading called Network. I circled it here for you. Okay. So you click that heading in the navigation pane, and that word will show up in the path field at the top of File Explorer. I circled that path field here. You're going to see that show up in the next slide. You may see your router and other network devices appear in the content pane on the right when you click Network. So here's the word network up in that content pane, and you click that so that word is highlighted. And then you type in 2 backslashes and the IP address of your router, and then tap the Enter key. Now, the path field will then change to network 19 and the IP address of your router, and the content pane will show your new NAS. I circled that here. Notice how it displays it as a network, or designates it as a network device. It has that little T intersection of cables with a green wrapper around them. We're going to see that again here in just a moment. In the content pane, when you are able to see your NAS, right-click on it, and a menu appears like you see here. And one of those choices in the menu is Pin to Quick Access. Now, what this means is you could choose any file, any folder, or any file, and make it permanently visible in the navigation pane under the words Quick Access. And that makes it handy as a permanent, quick way to get access to your NAS. So go ahead and tap that Pin to Quick Access, and now you can see after doing that, the new NAS appears in quick access with that little green T below it, indicating it is network storage. It's not local storage. So that's how you can tell them apart, particularly if you also have one that's local storage like I do. And also you can move that particular entry in quick access up and down very easily by click and dragging. So you would click it, hold the button down, and then move it, drag it up or down within the list of quick access items. And that's the way you can customize where it appears. Okay, now, once you've done all that, you're now ready to access the NAS, and you can do all the normal actions in NAS that you can do on internal storage or USB storage. In other words, you can copy, you can cut, you can paste, you can delete. When you cut, you can move things to other places. Actually, when I did some final tweaks on this presentation slide deck at about 1:30 this afternoon, and then I immediately copied it to 4 other places, including my NAS, just in case one of the storage systems failed. Yeah, when you're a presenter, you get kind of paranoid once in a while. NAS can be either the source or the destination or both when you want to copy files somewhere. All right, now we're going to do the same thing for iOS 15 using an app that has been available for more than 10 years in iOS for Apple devices. It's called Files. And in case you've never paid attention to it before, I copied this icon here that's on the right of your screen from my iPhone 10 running iOS 15. And this app is pre-configured to access the iCloud drive, but you also can configure it to access other cloud storages such as Google Drive and OneDrive. So we're going to learn how to connect this app to your NAS so you can copy files between your NAS and your Apple device. It's even feasible if you're running something really old, older than iOS 11. So I have iOS 10 on my old iPhone 5, and I downloaded an app called Remote Files Basic. It is a free app on the App Store. If you're running really old iOS, this is the app for you because you won't have the Files app on iOS 10 and older versions. So if you're running an older iOS 10 or earlier, you will find that no Files app is on your phone, and you can download the Remote Files Basic app from the App Store. It is a free app, and if you want to, you can scan this QR code. This is another slide, therefore, that you might want to save with Windows plus print screen so that you can scan it when you do learn how to scan QR codes with your Apple device. All right, now, the rest of this set of slides about iOS really refer to the Files app itself. When you open the Files app, the upper right corner of the screen will have a 3-dot ellipsis button. I circled it here for you. And when you tap that, a menu pops in that looks like the one you see here. Let's see. In that menu, one of the choices is Connect to Server. I have circled that here for you. So when that appears, you should tap that menu choice, and this screen will have a single field labeled Server. And what you need to do is type the address of your router into that field. And once you do that, then this button on the upper right corner labeled Connect will become active. You tap that button, and as long as you've typed the IP address correctly, then the next screen will appear, and it'll give you a choice of either logging in as a guest, which means there's no security on your NAS, or logging in as a registered user. Now, I haven't taught you how to create user accounts or a password for your NAS. It is possible to do that. In particular, if you have a lot of guests coming into the house and using, or your apartment and using your Wi-Fi, you may want to apply some security. Frankly, most of them, it will never occur to them that you might have a NAS connected to your router. So I'm not terribly paranoid about that myself. Once you've selected guest, tap next in the upper right corner, like I've circled here. And you will get a browse window that appears like this. It'll have your router IP address at the top, and it'll show you a folder, which is essentially the root directory of your NAS. You can tap that folder icon to see files on your NAS. Now, if you want to return to the top level browse screen, you can simply tap browse, as I circled here, within your Files app. And when you do go back to the main browse window, it'll list any particular cloud drives that you've already attached. And it will also list this thing under the heading shared, which is the IP address of your router. And that means anytime you open the Files app, you'll be able to tap that and get access to your NAS. Now, once you've gotten access to your NAS, what can you do with the Files app? Okay, you can long tap on any file or folder in the Files app to see a menu of actions available to you. So if you, for instance, if you want to move or delete a file or even an entire folder on your NAS, you can do that by long tapping on the thing to be removed. And you'll see this menu pop up. Down at the very bottom, you can see a choice called Delete Now that's in red, which means, of course, it's sort of a mini nuclear option. Once you delete it, you can't get it back. But there are other actions that you can use. If it's a zip file, it will uncompress it for you. You can rename the file or folder. You can duplicate it. You can move it somewhere else. There's a lot of things you can accomplish. Now, let's say, just as an example, you want to move or copy a file. And you can select one of those options once you long tapped on the file to be removed or copied. And you can open another folder or drive using the Files app in which you're going to paste that thing. So how do you do that? Well, go to the destination folder and do a long tap on a blank area in the folder, and this menu will pop up, this black bar here, and the main thing you're going to need is the word paste. So you tap that and it'll paste whatever you have chosen to move or copy into the folder where you did the long tap on the blank area. And that's all it takes. All right, now we're going to look at how to do that with an app available for free for Android devices called My Files. Now, My Files is a free app published by Samsung, and it's available on the Play Store for all Android devices. Here you see the icon that I copied from my Samsung Galaxy S10 running Android 13. And once again, I'm going to give you a QR code. If you want to download this app immediately onto your Android device, you can scan the QR code, and this QR code will open the Play Store to the app screen for Samsung My Files, and then you can install it. So in the Play Store, its title is actually Samsung My Files, but on your phone, it's just going to be called My Files. This is another one of those screens that you might want to save with Windows plus print screen. If you want to scan it later, you can just open the image and then scan it after you've learned how to do that with your Android device. Since the name isn't terribly long, you can go search for it on the App Store if you want instead. Now, on this next slide, I've shown you the main screen for the My Files app. And it lists two primary local storage areas, internal storage, and if you have an SD card installed, it'll list that as well. It'll list any cloud storage that you've already attached it to, and it'll list another one down here called network storage. And that's where you start when you want to configure the MyFiles app to use your NAS. So you click on network storage. You may have to scroll the screen a little bit to get there. And you'll see this screen. It's a little more complex than it is in the Apple Files app because you have to go through a couple of screens to get to the place where you type in the IP address of your router. So let's tap on plus, add network storage. And then this menu appears, and this is where it asks you what kind of communications is used with your network storage. And you want to select SMB. I circled that here. MyFiles searches for NAS across the entire LAN. It doesn't just search on your router. And sometimes it finds what it's looking for, and sometimes it doesn't. Notice there's a choice in the lower right corner called Add Manually. That choice allows you to type in the IP address of your router. It may also find any computer that offers a shared file or folder on your network. So if it doesn't find your new NAS, guess what? You tap that corner choice called Add Manually. I've circled it here for you. That's usually the fastest way to get it done, just by the way. And you're going to have a pop-up, a screen appear that has a couple of fields you need to fill in and a button you need to click. In the Add Network Drive screen, there's a field for the IP address of your new NAS storage. Well, that's the address of your router. You fill that in that field. Fill in port number 445, which is the internet standard point for SMB, standard port. Now you can skip the username and the password unless you've put security on your NAS. And here we click that button labeled Sign In Anonymously, which means you're acting as a guest to access the NAS. There is another button in the lower right corner of that screen. I didn't show it, called Add. So you tap that button, and at that point, MyFiles shows the NAS found at that IP address. Now, once you found it, when you go back to the main screen that opens when you start the MyFiles app, you can get to your NAS again by tapping network storage, which is what we use to set up the NAS connection. Then router IP address will appear like you see up here at the top of this screen, and then the NAS name. And that will let you see the folders and files contained in the NAS. So that's what you do after you set it up using the technique I've shown you here. Now, let's look at what the MyFiles app can do. And basically, it can do everything that you might expect to do with File Explorer on Windows. The first thing you do is long tap a file or folder that you want to delete, move, rename, whatever. And then your action items appear at the bottom, the verbs, so to speak. What do they include? Move, copy, share, delete, and more. If you tap more, then you see an option to rename and see an option to see details such as the size of the thing that you've selected. You can also check mark multiple items and copy them all or delete them all. So at this point, you have the choice of, back before you did the long tap, you have the choice of selecting multiple things to which to apply the verb. And if you choose move or copy, then the app displays a gray bar at the bottom of the screen. you can navigate to a different place on the NAS or someplace else. And the gray bar in the circled area on the left reports the number of items that you've chosen. You can navigate to the destination storage folder on your phone and then tap, it'll be either copy here or move here, depending on which verb you selected. You tap that button and the selected files and folders will appear in the destination storage folder. So you can do that when you're copying from your Android device to the NAS or when you're copying from the NAS to the Android device. It works in both directions. All right, that's really all I have for you folks. I'm going to mention one other thing. Coming up in October, on October 15th, at my local users group, the Potomac Area Technology and Computer Society, I'm going to unveil a new presentation, and it's called Use a Windows App to Scan QR Codes. This is especially valuable if the QR codes point to a URL that for an app that you can use on your Windows box itself. You don't want to scan that QR code using your phone. You want to scan it using your Windows computer, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Also that day, another member of our group will be presenting a topic called Favorite iOS Apps and Cross-Platform Synergies. He is the man who uses an Apple phone and a Windows computer, and he's going to talk about ways that those things, that's what the phrase cross-platform means, and he's going to talk about ways to make those things work well together. Now, you, as a member of an APCUG affiliated group, can obtain a free guest pass to get the Zoom details for that Pat Aces meeting on October 15th. And I've shown you the email address here that you can write to in order to request that. You'll need to send the name of your club, your first and last name, and the city and state in which you live. If you want a shortcut, if you scan this QR code, this will create the email in your phone's email app. And then the only thing you have to fill in is your full first and last name and your city and state, because I've already filled in the club name for you in this QR code. It will also, it opens up your phone's email app and it fills in the addressee, Fairfax meeting at pataces.org, and it'll also fill in the subject line. So all you have to do is fill in those two other things and then you can hit send. And they usually don't send out that stuff until I think about 4 days before the meeting. Might even be 2 days before the meeting. But in any event, you'll get an email from our club that gives you the Zoom details. And that's it. I'm going to stop the screen share and we'll take a look at questions. All right, I don't see anything in chat. So folks, anybody who has a question, just unmute yourself and hit me.
We've got some questions here.
Go ahead.
Can I, my husband is a Windows, I'm an Apple. Can we both use the same NAS?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I've shown you how to do that with Windows, and I've shown you how to do that with, oh, are you referring to a Mac? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Well, this is one little weakness in my, how do I charitably describe it? My studio here in my basement, I don't have a Mac. So I can't swear that I know how to make this work with the NAS, make a Mac work with the NAS. But I do know people who have done that, and it should work just fine. Although as I say, I can't teach you how to make it happen.
I can share that with you if you'd like. There's a few ways to do it. Inside your Mac, you should be familiar with the Finder, which is the Windows Explorer equivalent. So inside the Finder, there's a very similar feature that they have in Windows. Down the left side, where we had quick links in Windows. I'm sorry, I'm not in the frame here. Not that it matters. Where we had quick links in Windows, you will also see network. So if you click network, it will show you every device that's sharing something on the network. So right now on our network here, there's 3 computers that are sharing something. And all I need to do is click. I think you actually can right click and pin it as well. But if you double click on that item, so I'm trying to connect to you right now, it's not going to work because I don't know your password, but it'll ask you to either enter the password or click connect as. And when you click connect as, it'll prompt you for the username and password. Similar to what we had before with guest. If you're plugging into your router with the USB port, you probably just pick yes, unless you've actually set up accounts. And the other way to do it is through, once again, if you're in the Finder, in the top of the Mac, there's a area called Go, and then connect to server. And in that, it's kind of like typing a web address, but instead of typing HTTP, you would type SMB for Samba, ://. So instead of HTTP, it's SMB, the same way you type a web address. And then the address 192.168.1.1 or whatever it happens to be. Does that help?
Very much, thank you.
Sorry, I can't share it with you, but
Actually, I'm glad that you gave that much detail. It sounds like if you could do a screen capture of those steps, that I could throw it into the presentation. And as it happens, Mr. Tubaugh booked me for Wednesday night for the other club down in Columbus. And I'd be delighted to put that in the presentation if you can provide the screen captures.
happy to do it.
John Kennedy can give you my email address.
Oh, I have your email address.
Okay, well, it's gotten around a little bit. I appreciate that. So yeah. Any other questions?
Yes. Can you unplug your storage device and plug it back in without losing anything?
I've never done that experiment, but I will say this. If you are copying something big, let's say there's a video I produce every month of, it's called a pre-meeting slideshow that we use for our computer club here, Pat Aces. And it's about 1 gigabyte. And if now on mine, I have a nice fast network, but it does not copy that file instantly. So if I kicked off the copy from my computer into the NAS and I went upstairs and pulled that NAS out of its USB socket on the router, my guess is I'm going to lose part of it or all of it, all of that copy. I don't think it'll destroy the original on my computer. But frankly, what you've described is what I would call a less than optimal behavior. So I don't recommend trying it. Most of the time, if you're copying something that's less than 1 megabyte in size, it's going to happen so fast that you won't have the opportunity to unplug the NAS before the copying is completed. But if okay,
That's not the reason. The reason is if I want to lock up that backup into a fire safe after I'm done all the work, and then I take it out the next day to add more to it, will it do like Windows does? Will it find it and reactivate it?
As long as it's on the same router, it should automatically act, well, at least on Linksys, my experience has been, is that it will automatically be accessed again. And you will help, I mean, I understand what you're getting at. It's not, how destructive can I be? It's how careful can I be? I want to remove it from the NAS so nobody else has access to it so that power spikes won't come through and accidentally ruin things. So as long as you disconnect it when you know everything has, every copy that you have made onto it has been completed. You can disconnect it, put it in a lockbox overnight, come back the next day and reattach it, and it should work just fine. I have not done that. I can't tell you I learned that from experience, but since I went through the experience of disconnecting my flash drive and connecting my Samsung SSD to the router, it seemed to be perfectly happy with switching from disconnection and then reconnection. The router didn't flinch. It just made the new Samsung T7 SSD available immediately. So in that sense, I think it's a perfectly safe thing to do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I
Any
think
other
it also-
questions?
Yeah, I think that also kind of jumps in with not losing like an IP address, because it's the router that keeps the address. It just has a port that you're plugging in. So
Correct.
that's when you said it didn't really matter if you took out one and put a different one in. Because somebody
Yes.
might want to use a one NAS for backup and one for file sharing.
Yes. And John, you've hit the nail on the head. When I said you could do that, the real reason behind it is that the router IP address doesn't change while things are disconnected. It's exactly the same IP address. Now, if you've got a lot of small things that you want to use as a collective storage area for a NAS, I haven't done this, but you might want to try plugging in a powered USB hub to your router and then plug in 2 or 3 USB flash drives and see if all of those are visible as NAS devices. I haven't done that, but I'm thinking I might do that later this afternoon. It just occurred to me because this is the era when USB flash drives are dirt cheap. Here's one of those 256 gig Micro Center flash drives. I think I own 3 of them. And, I could try plugging in 2 of them, see if they work with a USB hub between, connect those things to the USB hub, connect the USB hub to the USB port on the router, see if it works. I don't know if it will or not. I suspect it will, but I don't know what it'll look like. It's an interesting idea. Anything else, folks?
I have a comment about your definition of RAID. Years ago, when I started fiddling around with this stuff, I ran across the definition of that. And I think it's supposed to be redundant array of independent drives.
No, it is inexpensive, and there's a reason. The idea was if you wanted to establish a good redundant storage system that had a net capacity of, say, half a petabyte, you couldn't go out and buy a drive that was half a petabyte, but you could buy a bunch of relatively inexpensive 1 terabyte drives and build a half a petabyte RAID. That's not something you do at home. That's for server data centers. But the point was that the disks are inexpensive. They are not the top of the line SCSI, SCSI disks that are commonly used only in data centers. They're very inexpensive. Now, you might say, well, John, if I go into Micro Center and I find a RAID that costs $1,000, how can you call that inexpensive? What's adding to the expense there is the fact that the RAID hardware and software inside that box knows how to copy files to multiple drives and to access pieces of files very quickly from those multiple drives. That's what adds to the expense. But the disks inside are simply chosen because they're an appropriate size for what the work you need to do, and because when you buy 5 1 TB drives, it costs a lot less than buying a 5 TB drive. So you're working economies of scale in effect. So that's it's independent. Yes, you can say it that way, but really the thing that made RAID popular is that you could put inexpensive drives, and if one fails, you can replace it inexpensively. That's why that word is inexpensive in that acronym.
Okay.
Anything else, folks? All right, those of you in the classroom, I know you can't immediately run to your router in your home and see if it has a USB port on it, but most of the, except for the least expensive routers, I think most of the routers that have been sold over the past 7 or 8 years do have that USB port. They may not be USB 3, but they do have a USB port. I will say that sometimes the routers that are provided to you by companies like Fios, Fios uses or has been using a brand called Ameritech, and those things are dirt cheap. That's why they provide them to customers. And typically they don't have a USB port on the back. But I can't swear to that because I haven't run around to every Fios customer in the United States to try to check that out. I do know they shoved one at me once, and I looked at it and I said, no, thank you. But that's all the research that I've done. Nonetheless, I think many of you will find that you have a USB port that you can use for this NAS purpose. And like I said, you may have a USB flash drive sitting around so you can try it out. And that way you don't even have to spend any money to give it a test on your router and work through the steps to connect your Windows box or your Mac or your Android device or your Apple portable device to the NAS. Mr. Tubaugh has his hand up. How polite. Please go ahead.
I just wanted to let you know that the screenshots are uploaded in chat for you. Use whichever ones you see handy.
Oh my. Oh, I see all of a sudden there are 6 chats. Let's
The
take
only
a look.
problem is that you've got it set so that we can't save the chat.
Oh, well, I can change that.
You,
Okay.
you can try to go through the save the file, but
It's the first time somebody's tried to send me screenshots through chat. This is a novel experience for me. Let's see what happens here. So if it says click to download. Okay, if I point at one of them, it says click to download. So let's see what happens. Yeah. Okay, so I'll tell you what. It says it wants to put it in the System32 folder, which is, to put it mildly, not convenient.
right.
But what I can do is put it on the desktop. So I'll do that. Well, that's a kind of a cool thing. I've never heard of anybody trying to do this before through chat. I may have to write an article about this. All right.
I
Desktop.
don't see a way to enable save chat right in the active meeting. Am I missing something, John?
Must be in the other settings because that's what we have.
It used to be enabled, and I don't
Yeah.
know why I got turned off. We have Greg with his hand up.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah. I do have a question. You may have mentioned it because I dropped out my network during your presentation. But do you know the differences or any betterment of using the USB port or the network port on the router is connect the NAS?
Good question. The way I have outlined, first of all, I've not tried to attach it to a network port. Now, the network ports There's one company that about 10 years ago started selling a hard drive enclosure with a network port socket, an RJ45 socket.
Okay.
And it's called Addonics, Addonics. And they got ripped to pieces by the community that tried it. Okay, the comments were, and I happened to buy one myself. I tried it and it just didn't work. And there are still places where you can buy that interface, and it has, on one end, it has an RJ45 socket, and the other end, it has a USB socket. So you can attach that your USB storage to that interface, and then that interface to your router. I'm telling you, don't bother, because because the thing doesn't work. And it's no longer being manufactured. I'm not even sure Addonics still exists, but they're certainly not making it anymore. Now, I suspect some clever person could make such a thing and make it available to us. The trick when you do that, assuming somebody else makes something that's reliable for this purpose, is that when you connect your NAS via an RJ45 and an Ethernet cable to your router, the NAS gets its own IP address, which is not the same as the router. There's a disadvantage in that. You don't know what that IP address is. You kind of have to go exploring, figure it out, eliminate all the other devices on your network, and that last one is going to be your NAS. But there's an advantage in it as well. The one thing that I have not mentioned to you about the technique I've described, where you attach through a USB port to the router, is that that's the only method that prevents you from accessing your NAS on the wide area network, in other words, the rest of the world outside your house. You have to do something else, and that is establishing what's called a port forwarding rule in your router, so that requests that come in to access the NAS on a certain port, and don't use 445 as that port, on your router's external IP address, the address that the rest of the world sees when they try to contact your router. So you can make the NAS available to you when you leave your house. You can access it from your phone, your tablet, whatever, as long as those things are connected to either the cellular data network or another Wi-Fi. You can access your NAS from outside the house. It's just not as easy as what I've described, because what I've described, frankly, it fit in less than an hour to, show you how to access it. But establishing a port forwarding rule is an advanced topic. I've used it to send music that's running on streaming on my home network through VLC. I've used it to access that music from outside my house. I set up a port forwarding rule on my router for that purpose. If you don't know how to, if you want to do that, the first thing you have to learn is to create that port forwarding rule. And I'm telling you, that's not an easy thing to do, and it will not work for forwarding a port to the router itself and its local IP address. Boy, have I tried that. I tried and tried and tried and tried and tried several different techniques, even a double forward, and it didn't work.
Okay.
So I leave that as an exercise for the advanced student.
Not me.
Well, it's not me either, apparently, but I will tell you, John Kennedy may already be familiar with this, since he's been doing Raspberry Pi stuff. There is an application on Raspberry Pi that will allow it to act as the NAS host. And there's another one that will allow it to act as a NAS host through your router to the rest of the world. If you do that thing to the rest of the world, you might consider putting some security on it so that anybody who happens to stumble across it can't access it. But I have two Raspberry Pis sitting here, Raspberry Pi 2 that doesn't have, it only has USB 2, not USB 3. And Raspberry Pi 400, which has the USB 3, but you have to get it to turn off all its beautiful video in order to work as a Plex server. So I'm gnashing my teeth. What do I do? The only reason I have the 400 is because I couldn't buy a Raspberry Pi 4. The Raspberry Pi 4s were retailing for about 175, and the Raspberry Pi 400 was retailing for 90 at the time I bought it. So I feel like I got a really good deal, but on the other hand, the graphics are so nice, I don't want to turn it into a headless Raspberry Pi. That's headless means that you no longer have access to the GUI. You have to use only the terminal to communicate with it. So I've given you a huge disorganized data dump here, and I apologize to all of you who didn't understand that. But if you want to access your NAS from outside the house, don't attach it to your router, attach it to something else. And you'll have to learn how to do port forwarding on top of that.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
If he got all the chats,
Yeah.
I just checked our router here. It has both a USB 3 and a USB 2.
Yep, that makes sense. Use 2 for a printer, use 3 for NAS.
Well,
Yeah. By the way, John, I'm a
Pretty much.
former ET.
Pardon me?
I'm a former ET.
Yeah, well, I'm a software developer, and you know what that means. We don't do
Yeah.
hardware, but I learned a lot about this by, talking to people at work and then doing some experiments at home. I've had the router in here since 2001, I think. And when you have motivation, it can really drive your learning curve pretty fast. And I really wanted to get this NAS thing working. It's now, I've had it for 6 months, I think. And, in terms of just making me more confident that I can deliver presentations, for instance, having that copy on that NAS means that if my big computer goes down, and it has recently, I've got a fairly new one here to replace it. I can copy the thing onto from the NAS onto my laptop, and then present using the laptop. So John Kennedy can tell you that being on the Speakers Bureau of APCUG, you can call it paranoia, you can call it prudence, but whatever it is, you make copies of things. He's nodding his head.
Hey, John.
okay.
Do you want to, well, is your email address public? Would you like to give that out in case people have questions, or should we do a different method? We're going to have to stop the recording here in just a second.
Yeah, hang on. Did I not put that in my, sometimes I put it in the last slide. Yeah, I did put it in the last slide. jkraut.apcug.presenter@gmail.com. And I don't think I said this before, but I am going to take the slides and turn them into a PDF and send it to you all, so you can post it on your website or distribute it by email, whatever. If I can write something intelligible with all these screenshots that I've just saved off of the chat, then I'll include that too for the Mac, just to augment it a little bit, make it even more complete than it was.
John, I'm putting that in chat, but I didn't catch it all. It's your
Okay.
first initial last name at APCUG.
No.
Okay.
First initial last name dot APCUG dot presenter @gmail.com.
Does that look correct?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, you should be able to save your chat now. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.